Hello, hello. Good afternoon, or at least it's afternoon at the time of this recording. I am Christopher Harris, Executive Director of Unhyphenated America, and this is just a random video, something that was on my mind. Nothing really related to politics, nothing in the realm specifically of geopolitical, socioeconomic issues, although things invariably end up rolling back around to geopolitical, socioeconomic issues. And I was just sitting there thinking, because I was posting on my personal Facebook page earlier about things that influenced me when I was in my formative years, about like personal appearance and everything like that, and what a difference it makes. And it was, I was just saying, when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you're more confident. And when you're more confident, you tend to perform better. And when you perform better, you get better results, you get more praise, you get more appreciation. It's a cyclical thing. And I do some mentoring outside of my, I guess you would say, in addition to everything that I do, one of the things that I do is I do some mentoring, because I've been the beneficiary of mentorship at different stages in my life. And really the only thing that my mentors have ever asked of me is to respect their time and pay it forward. And so I realized that I've been blessed in so many ways that other people have not been. And so I just try to pay it forward. If there's little things that I've learned, there's little things that mean so much. I'll give you an example. Excuse me. A little nose tickle there, right? But just the power of your image and the way you carry yourself. And people always say children are little tape recorders, right? Not only are they little tape recorders, but they're little cameras, they're little camcorders, right? I'll take you back, about 6 years ago. My godson is 14 years old, and he has a little brother who's 5 years younger than him, right? So, this is about 5 years ago. So my godson, his name is Trey, and his name is not actually Trey. He is the third, right? And so they simply call him Trey as a nickname. But he's got a younger brother, Brian. And I remember I was talking to their mother, and their mother was saying to me, she says, Chris, Brian came up to me and he said, "Hey mom, look at me," right? And he had on his little baseball cap, and he said, and he had on top of his baseball cap, he had his sunglasses, right? Because, like, for example, sometimes I wear contacts, sometimes I wear glasses, it all depends, right? And when I do, of course, if I'm wearing sunglasses, I'll put, when I'm wearing especially when I'm wearing a baseball cap, I'll put my sunglasses on the visor of my baseball cap, like if I'm indoors or something, right? That way I don't lose them or anything like that. And it's very interesting, because here it is that he was like 4 years old, and he went up to his mother and said, "Hey mom, look at me. This is the way Uncle Chris wears his sunglasses," right? And it just was like, wow. I've always known that people pay attention and that kids are watching what you do or will model what you do. But it really just hit me upside the head at that moment. Like, here it is. Brian is not my godson. Although I spent, significant time around Brian, his older brother is my godson. I more directly poured into him as my godson, but all along, his little brother is watching, right? And so there are a team of people. I work with a team of people, and I directly mentor a few guys. But there's a whole crew of guys that all hang out together. And even though I don't directly mentor them, I've come to realize they watch me. And so, for example, when we see each other on a regular basis, periodic basis, typically when we see each other, we're in more of a business casual type setting, and our attire is more business casual. And, you know, I mean, just because I mean, right now, this is pure casual, right? You know, but when I'm in a more business casual, I try to make sure that I look good. You know, from head to toe. See, you have to understand, I come from a military family background, right? And this interesting thing is that, you know, my age group, we wanted to look good. I'm 46 years old. We wanted to look good when we walked out of the house. I can't relate when I see these kids in this current generation, and it seems like they go out of their way sometimes to look slovenly. I don't get that. I don't know. You look like you're homeless. I don't understand trying to look like you're homeless. You know what I mean? It's like, and you pay a lot of money to try to look homeless. I don't understand that. Like, you know, the high fashion stuff. You know, I mean, I appreciate Kanye West in his, I hope and believe and pray that Kanye West is trying to grow as an individual, but I look at some of the fashions he has out there, and I'm like, oh, that's refugee clothing, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, it's the refugee style. Oh, that's what you're going for. And then you look and you're like, yo, I mean, how much are these clothes? The Yeezys? They're like, oh yeah, man, this new Yeezy. And it's like, you could be wearing a Yeezy outfit from head to toe, and it's like $1,000 for the look from head to toe. And I'm like, I can go to the homeless shelter or to the Goodwill and put together an outfit that looks somewhat slovenly like that, and I'll do it for like $12. So I don't understand paying $1,000 to look homeless, to look disheveled. I don't get that. Once again, I come from a generation where, you know, we wanted to look good, and especially being black, right? I mean, it's interesting because, like, my family, being from places like Detroit, one of the things is that, you know, you worked in the factories, and so you got your hands dirty for a living. But yet, if you see all the pictures I see of my, you know, grandparents and so on and so forth, after 5 o'clock, right, or whatever time quitting time was, after they got off work, they were always cleaned up and well dressed. And I think that's interesting. It's like, you know, like, I was talking to somebody and they were talking about some movie, and the movie was like some courtroom drama, and it was supposed to be showing, you know, some black folks who were going to court or were in the courtroom back in the, you know, 1920s, 30s, 40s, something like that, right? And what it showed was that a whole bunch of black folks who were slovenly dressed. And I'm like, that's not even remotely historically accurate, because you might have had a job that was a menial labor job. You might have had a job that required you to get your hands dirty and get dirt underneath your fingernails. But black folks back then, when you were finished doing your work, there was no way in heck that you were going to be caught out in public about town looking slovenly. You certainly would not have went to something like going to court, going to City Hall, something like that, looking slovenly. Because black folks knew back then that we were already fighting an uphill battle, dealing with racism and so on and so forth. We weren't going to exasperate the issue by looking slovenly. I go back to, you know, a hero of mine, a mentor, if you will, that dude, Booker T. Washington. And one of the things, you know, he talked about that, right? He talked about character. When you went to Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, one of the things that he did was that he taught people to, one of the first things he did was taught them how to use a toothbrush. Remember, the name of his book was Up From Slavery, right? Up From Slavery. He was basically saying, listen, for centuries, you've essentially been beast of burden. And he talked about the power of the difference between the fact that you were worked like a beast of burden for all these years. You were given just the shelter you were given, the food you were given were all minimal, right? He said there were times, of course, when he basically ran around almost naked. And then when he did get clothes, they were, you know, secondhand, scrapped together clothes. And so when he went to school, he went to Hampton Institute. And then, of course, later on when he founded Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, one of the things he focused on was teaching black folks to focus on their appearance and focus on their hygiene. And so this was the norm. This was the standard for black folks from post-slavery 1865, really up until about 99, 2000, something along those lines, is when it, or maybe mid 1990s, is when it somehow became cool to look slovenly. And it's just fascinating that the further we have gotten from slavery, see, I didn't intend to go this direction, but like I said, everything can be tied in. But the further we've gone from slavery, the more we've lost our morals. Isn't that funny? It's like we had greater morals, we had greater family unity, all those things were better, oddly enough. The people who were closer to slavery, who were raised during Jim Crow, had more class and savoir-faire, right, about themselves, more dignity than people who were been born 150 plus years after slavery. And so caring about your appearance is interesting. Like, okay, even things like the afro, right? Back in the 1970s, when people started wearing afros, I had to laugh because, like, your afro had to be on point, right? I mean, like, you took pride in your afro having a certain shape. There had to be the sphericalness. It had to be spherical, right? Your fro had to have that perfect sphericalness. And you got it, you carried your afro pick to pick it out. And then you would do the whole shaping up thing to have your fro be symmetrical and spherical. And then see, you fast forward to my formative years in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when we started rocking like the high top fades and so on and so forth. And the interesting thing about that is that, yes, we would walk around with like 12 inches of hair piled on top of our head. But I'm gonna tell you what, man, you want to fight? Let somebody poke your box. Hey, man, back up off me, dude, right? You be like, I just spent, you're just like, I spent all this time getting my box just right. Man, don't be messing with, and your fade had to be tight. You want to get clown? Have a messed up fade. Like, if you were a barber who knew how to get that perfect fade, oh yeah, bruh. It was all about, you wanted to look good. I mean, like, y'all would laugh if you saw pictures from my junior and senior prom. And I show it to some of the young dudes, and, they all look to get a laugh because they're like, man, you look like you a member of New Edition. That was the point. I'm saying? That was the point, right? And I look back now and I'm like, yeah, man, that was a little bit much, but I was still smoother than silk, cleaner than the Board of Health. Couldn't tell me nothing. I wore custom made silk brocade tuxes for my junior and senior prom. Ah! Yes. I was so clean, you couldn't tell me nothing. Oh, man. But you know what, man? Here's what's funny. That I wasn't always confident in myself. In fact, once again, I'm 46 years old. I will tell you, I didn't truly become confident in myself until I was in my, I'll say like, and when I say truly confident in myself, I mean all around. I mean, there were some things that I became more confident about than others. But from a holistic standpoint, I will tell you that I was roughly 30 to somewhere between 30 and maybe 32, 33 before I really felt confident in who I was. But I still made sure that I looked good, and that helped to improve my confidence, right? So I had a holistic confidence, a true internal confidence when I was 31, 32 years old. Prior to that, I just kind of said, it was like I had to tell myself, be confident. Because listen, man, most people, you're not really confident in yourself, and especially when you're in your teens. Like, you're stupid, right? Teenagers are the stupidest people on the planet, just because you're still hormonal and your brain's not even fully formed. So you're kind of stupid, and you will be stupid, and it's okay. I don't expect you to be anything less or anything other than stupid, because you're a teenager, right? You're not a grown person yet. By the time you're 30, you should be not stupid, right? I mean, it's your brain's fully formed. You're 30. You've been an adult for almost, over a decade at that point. Less excuses for being stupid, right? But how you look, how you carry yourself matters, right? And so I was posting on my page about like the things that influenced me. I go back to Eddie Murphy. No, okay, hold on. Before I go to that, let me say, I was in ROTC, Air Force Junior ROTC, throughout high school, all except my last semester of my senior year, because I ended up needing to take another class to make sure. It's funny, when it came to high school graduation, we needed 20 credits to graduate, and at the end of my junior year, I had 19 and a half credits. So really, I kind of blew off most of my senior year. But I found out the last semester that there was actually a class that I was missing a particular elective in order to graduate. So isn't it funny? I had more than enough credits to graduate, but I was missing a particular credit from a particular type of class. Otherwise, I wasn't going to graduate, and that was not an option. So I basically ended up having to drop ROTC the second semester of my senior year so I could take a computer music class that I needed as an elective to graduate. But otherwise, I was in ROTC throughout my entire high school years. And because I am an Air Force brat, I'm a military brat, and I came up with parents, a father in particular who was in the military, who just drilled into me. Like, so you have to understand, my father was a federal agent in the Air Force, and my father was truly one of the best of the best. I mean, the reason why he became one of the first, literally first handful of black people to become a member of the elite organization within the Air Force, the Office of Special Investigations, is because my father was damn good at everything that he did. He had numerous awards for being like an Airman of the Quarter, Airman of the Year, Base Airman, Squadron Airman, Theater Airman of the Year, so on and so forth, right? And that's because he excelled to that level, is the reason why he was able to apply for and get accepted into the Office of Special Investigations and become literally one of the first black OSI agents in the history of the United States Air Force. And so because he was one of very few in an elite organization, everything he did, my dad was particular about it and immaculate in how he dressed. And so that's what I saw growing up. And so, of course, I emulated that. And so my father was always clean. Of course, he didn't wear a uniform most of my life, or at least in most of my memory, he did not wear a uniform. He wore a suit and tie because he was an agent, right? But even when he did wear a uniform, well, he was always immaculate, whether he was in uniform or not. Although the funny side story is that off duty, after work, my dad used to wear what my mother would call his gas station attendant clothes. And that's a whole nother long story. Is that because he wore a suit and tie and all that, pretty much all the time, he just wanted to relax. And so literally my dad would wear clothes that looked like a gas station attendant wore. He actually had them in different colors. Like, literally, just imagine a guy who, like, all he needed was, like, a little name tag that said Bob. My dad's name is not Bob, but let's just say his name was Bob. All he needed was a little name tag that would say Bob on it, and that's what he would look like. But it was always perfectly pressed, but that's what he wore. And a lot of that, I think, had to do with the fact of, his father was a master welder, and I think part of it was like a tribute to his father, so he did that when he was not in his suit and tie and everything like that. But so that's how I was raised, and so when I started doing ROTC, and I wore the uniform, which I wore proudly, and it was, we had to follow what the Air Force called 3510 standards, right? Which is the military Air Force regulation for your appearance. My father was like, all right, son, if you're gonna wear the uniform, look sharp in it. And so it's interesting because whenever I would put on the uniform, I always stood up a little bit, because it's just like, you need to look the part, and then on top of that, my instructors, Sergeant Davis, for example, who literally, listen, out of my entire 12 years of high school, or not quite high school, but K through 12, I've talked about this before on my page. I'm not a big fan of the public education system. I can't really say that I got much value out of my K through 12 education. In fact, I learned so much more on my own, more so than I learned in school. But that's that's neither here nor there. The thing is, Senior Master Sergeant Fred Davis was one of my instructors, and Sergeant Davis had one of the biggest impacts on me. He was like 5'3". I mean, he's a small guy, but man, he had a big presence, and he was always immaculate. His uniform, the creases were razor sharp and everything like that. And so when it came to uniform day, and we had to, and we had to do inspection, like he would look you up and down, and you had to, he's like, your gig line is off, or this is off, go fix that, right? And that's how, so that was an influence, and I just always wanted to look good, especially in uniform. And then, there's a picture of me. There's not a whole lot of pictures of me from my ROTC days, but there's one picture of me where I looked super sharp, except for one thing. I was wearing like a color guard uniform, and I had the shiny buckle, but in the picture, my buckle had slipped down just a little bit. So I look, and when I saw the picture, I was like, oh crap, right? Because I'm like, literally everything about that picture, Sergeant Davis would have just been so proud, except my belt buckle was down just a little. And just for me, see, most people will look and be like, oh man, you look sharp. I'm like, yo, my belt buckle is down. I'm feeling like I'm slovenly because my belt buckle is not up where it should be. That's the level of attention to detail that I was raised with. And some of you may know, like I said, I came to Washington, D.C. working for my congressman. And here's an interesting side story. I always, when I wear a suit, I try to look, immaculate. It's just, I walk around and, and I like right now, right? I'm in, Dockers basically, and some loafers and all that. I'm casual. But trust me, when I put on any sort of suit and tie, I'm very meticulous about things. And I realize now, because other people have pointed it out, but whenever I put on a suit and tie, once again, it's almost like I'm putting on the military uniform, and I stand up a little straighter and everything like that. And years ago, when I was working on Capitol Hill, I actually met recently departed Congressman Elijah Cummings from Baltimore. I met him in 2003 at the Congressional Black Caucus event that was held at Union Station in Washington, D.C. It was a beautiful affair. I was working for a Republican congressman. Listen, I was a registered independent at that point. I had already left the DNC because I had been researching politics for about 3 years, and I came to the conclusion that I was not a Democrat, that I didn't really agree with the Democratic Party anymore. However, I was still sympathetic to the DNC, and that's a whole nother story about when you're black. It's the culture, right? When you've been immersed in the culture, as I would refer to as the wretched subculture of African Americanism, when you've been immersed in that culture, you still want to be part of it, and you still want that, like the Congressional Black Caucus Week events are just epic, right? It's just like where all the beautiful black people go. And so, of course, I went. Even though I was working for a Republican congressman, I went, right? Had a great time. A lot of just good-looking, sharp people. So it was great to be at that event. But, I mean, it's funny. Today, I have no desire to go to any Congressional Black Caucus event because I so vehemently disagree with just about everything that they're about, what they believe, what they promote. And so I don't even want to be in the presence of anyone from the Congressional Black Caucus or those that support it. Nonetheless, 2003 Congressional Black Caucus event there. It's Union Station, Washington, D.C., in the lobby area, which it's not the lobby, foyer. If you've ever been to Union Station, it's a grand station, and they rented it out, right? So, there for that. And I end up meeting, at that time, chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Elijah Cummings. Had a cool little conversation with him. He said, "You're a sharp young man, come by and see me. Or drop by my office, schedule an appointment, let's get together." Fine. So the next day, or whatever day after, I go by his office, say, "Hey, Congressman Cummings said to drop by, schedule a time." Fine. So I scheduled a time. It was going to be like, a couple days from now. Great. I come back a couple days, and of course, I'm like, man, I'm about to hang out with the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, man. I'm doing big things, you know what I'm saying? I came here to D.C. to do big things, and all of a sudden, I'm hanging out with the chairman of the Black Caucus, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, this is what I came to D.C. for, man. So I have my appointment. I'm there. I'm standing there waiting. Right, I get there, standing in the waiting room, and I don't like to sit down a whole lot. It's just like sometimes I just want to stand up. So I'm standing there, and as a matter of fact, I remember I'm wearing a black suit. I'm wearing a black suit, white shirt, and I think a red tie, right? And his receptionist, so I'm standing there, she said, "Oh, Mr. Cummings will be with you shortly," right? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm standing there, and basically it's like 30 minutes or so go by, because I got there like 10 minutes early, and like 30 minutes go by from the time I'm supposed to have my appointment with him, and I'm still standing there, and they're like, "Oh, he'll be with you shortly in another 10 minutes. And long story short with that is he ended up basically pushing me off. They're like, "Oh yeah, he can't meet with you today." I'm like, yo, I've been here like 40 minutes waiting to talk with you. You could have had somebody come out and say before that you're not going. I know I'm a little intern and everything like that, but you got me sitting out here for 30 minutes waiting on you, and then you're going to tell me, "Sorry, I can't see you." And so literally, this is a personal thing. Listen, I've been like, screw him since 2003. And literally, when Elijah Cummings died, I was like, oh, well, right? Because I'm still carrying that grudge from him leaving me in the waiting room for 30 minutes, basically blowing me off. But anyway, that wasn't even the point of that. The whole point was, as I'm standing there waiting for him, his receptionist or whatever like that, she said, "Are you in the military?" And I was like, no. I said, why do you ask? She said, "Because you stand straighter than anybody I've ever seen." And I didn't realize, that was literally the first time I ever realized how I do, how I stand like that when I'm suited up. I'm like everything, shoulders back and so on and so forth. It's that military bearing. When I was working for my congressman, and forgive me, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I know the congressman's name. My congressman, Mr. Heffley, was the third ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, and as a result, he was the chairman of the House Readiness Committee, and as a result, he met with all the senior military members, and I got a chance to sit in on a few congressional hearings. He said, "Hey, Chris, sit in on some of these hearings. I want you to take notes. I want to get your take on, what your perspective is and so on and so forth. So I had a chance every day that Mr. Heffley was in office, because at that point Congress was really only in session 3 days a week, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is when they held hearings and sessions and so on and so forth, right? The other days they were back in their district. But every day that Mr. Heffley was in office, in session, I got a chance to spend 10, 15 minutes with him in the morning before things got busy. But I got a chance to meet some interesting people, some dignitaries, and so on and so forth. I remember meeting the guy who was he was a Marine general, and I believe, and I don't want to mistake this, but I believe he was the Marine general who was the NATO commander. I think he was a 4-star, if I remember correctly. But this guy was the epitome of a Marine, right? Ramrod. I mean, he was like probably 6'2", right? I'm 6 foot. He was probably 6'2", basically like had gray hair. He had like the buzz cut. When you think of a Marine with the buzz cut, he had steel gray hair, just really short buzz cut, and dude was just sharp. Look, you could cut yourself on his creases. He was just, I was like, sir, you are a Marine, right? When I think of a Marine, that's that image. And looking good matters, right? I mean, it really changes people's perspective of you when you look good. People treat you differently when you look good, right? And I'm not saying look good like you have to necessarily be physically handsome or physically beautiful, right? You can make up for a lack of being blessed with physical good looks by being immaculately dressed, right? Making sure your hygiene is on point, right? Looking good and making sure your hygiene is on point can do a lot and can go a long way to help make up for whatever, you lack in innate, quote, good looks. It matters. When you look good, you feel good. When you feel good, you feel more confident and you perform better and you project an image that will cause people to treat you better. And so here's the thing, over time, and of course, as I've become more confident in myself, it doesn't matter how I'm dressed. Now, you're not going to see me looking slovenly, but even if I'm just wearing jeans and a t-shirt and so on and so forth, now that whole mindset, it's all a mindset now. And now I project that regardless of whether I'm wearing a just tuxedo or a suit or business casual sport coat and so on and so forth, or if I'm wearing Dockers and a fleece like this, or if I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt, now it all comes up out of me because I've focused on doing that for so long. It's become who I am, right? And so some people might say fake it till you make it. I don't necessarily think it's faking it till you make it, but you become how you think, right? And so you tell yourself that enough. If you tell yourself, I'm confident enough, if you have words of affirmation that you speak about yourself to yourself enough, you'll eventually begin to emulate that. You'll believe that. You'll embrace that. And trust me, you will carry yourself differently. And when you carry yourself differently, you will get different results from people, right? And so it's interesting. Let's dive back into the race issue. I'm going to drink a little water here. I have conflicts, if you will, with a few black folks who, they say, well, Chris, it's not that simple. And, you still got to deal with race issues of race and racism. And I'm like, listen, first of all, perfection is not a requirement for greatness. That's something you'll hear me say frequently. And once again, perfection is not a requirement for greatness. America is great, right? America is not perfect, but perfection is not a requirement for greatness. And there are people who believe that since America's not perfect, it's not good. And since it's not good, it can't be great. So people have made good, or perfect rather, the enemy of good. And therefore they're like, you can't be great. And I just think it's sad because you're comparing America to utopia. And if you realize utopia is a place that does not exist, utopia is nowhere. Right? And so you're expecting rather everyone you meet to let me say this more specifically. Unfortunately, a lot of black people have this ridiculous notion that because they may encounter racism, and yes, listen, racism still exists because racism is a sin of the heart. So there will always be individuals who have isms, racism, sexism, whatever other ism. There will always be individuals who have isms based off of whatever influenced them growing up. So it's sad, it's immature, it's just downright childish, it's stupid for you to expect there to ever be a day when no isms exist. For you to expect that there'll ever be a day when no one you encounter, and I'm speaking specifically to black folks at this point, for you to expect that there'll be a day when no individual that you ever encounter will have some sort of ism against you, or more specifically, some sort of racist beliefs against you. How childish are you to think that that's ever going to happen? You're looking for perfection. You're looking for utopia. You're looking for heaven on earth. And guess what? It's not going to happen because this earth is populated with flawed human beings, including your sorry butt. You suck, just like I do. You're flawed, just like me. And so why are you holding everyone else to a higher standard than you would hold yourself? You have isms. Oh yeah, I'm sure if we sat down and talked enough and I asked enough probing questions, we would find out what your ism is. But yet somehow you have elevated racism to like the worst thing ever, right? Now, does racism exist? Yes, I just acknowledged that racism exists. But the thing is, you're talking about institutional racism. So you're basically saying that there's this whole organized institution, there's this whole cultural thing where supposedly everybody who's not black is racist against you, right? Everybody who's not black doesn't like you specifically because of the color of your skin. That's what you believe. But see, then went along, I'm sorry, let me back up. You believe that everybody who's not black hates all black people, right? Once again, you're saying that perfection doesn't exist, so it can't be good. And if it's not good, it can't be great. So you're using the standard of perfection. Okay, let's apply that to you. So once you have said you basically believe that everybody who's not black is racist against everyone who is black, so what if I'm able to point out people like myself who don't experience the type of racism that you say is institutional? You're like, oh yeah, well, you're just not, you're just blind to it. Okay, but isn't perception reality? If you want to see, you're trying to go into an intellectual conversation, and you're unarmed. You're not ready for this. You haven't thought beyond stage one. I think all the time. That's why I only sleep like 5 hours a day, because I can't get this to stop. I have to be so tired I pass out, because otherwise my brain is going. So I think about these things. So the whole idea that institutional racism exists, that means it has to be absolute, right? And I've pointed out to people, and I've taken some of the other young black men that I've mentored and said, hey, you know what? Hang out with me. They'll come along with me, and we'll go into a dealership like a Porsche, an Audi, a Mercedes dealership. And you know what ends up happening when I walk into the dealership? Mind you, I don't wear a suit and tie on a regular basis. Sometimes I'm wearing jeans and a polo shirt or something like that. I don't walk around all G'd up all the time. I look good wherever I go, because that's just what I do, baby. But I don't walk around all formal all the time. And yet I can go into a dealership for a luxury car, or my wife and I are in the market right now. We're looking to either buy or possibly build a home. And yes, I don't say this to brag at all, but we live in Northern Virginia, and quite frankly, buying $1 million home in Northern Virginia is really not a big deal because it's so freaking expensive. But yes, we will look at $1 million homes, and sometimes just for the kicks, we'll look at multi-million-dollar homes that are currently outside of my price range, but I like to look at them anyway because I aspire to go that much higher, and I plan on having a multi-million-dollar home. Why? Because it's possible. And you know what? My wife and I, along with one of the young men that I've mentored, we've walked into these homes in these exclusive areas of Northern Virginia. And you know how we get treated by the realtor who's in the house for the open house? Like normal. They're like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Come on in. You know, never once have I detected a hint of, oh my gosh, what is this Negro doing here? This Negro knows he can't afford to buy a house like this. No, I've never got that. Right? Because the reality is, for most of these realtors, we probably make more money than they do. But anyway, it's like, dude, I don't experience that because usually, simply because of the way I carry myself, it becomes immediately apparent to most people that I'm not someone for you to try to talk down to. There's nothing about my presence that gives you the slightest impression that you can talk down to me. In fact, I'm much more likely, oddly enough, to have another black person talk down to me than I am to have a person of any other ethnicity. And that's a whole nother conversation, right? But does racism exist? Of course it exists, because it's a flaw, a failing of human nature and human behavior. But to assume that there's this grand concerted institutional effort to oppress you or to oppress every, because it's funny, like people talk about racism, they act like it's just racism against black people, right? And I always point this out. I'm like, there's a lot of Indian people, meaning from East Asia, right? East Asian Indians, there's a lot of them that are as dark or darker than me, and yet in the United States of America, the ethnic group with the highest median household income, median, in case you're not aware, I'm not trying to be condescending, but I realize sometimes people are not really aware of what some words mean, so I'll explain. Median meaning half are below and half are above, which is not the same as the average, right? They're similar, but they're not the same. The median household income for people of East Asian Indian ethnicity is twice that of the median household income for white people in America. And so I point this out. This is just the facts. When you know the numbers and you know the facts, you will just beat down all the other ridiculous crap. And you realize when people are like, yeah, man, you know, the white man be trying to keep us down and so on and so forth. And then I'm like, okay, so the white man wants to keep people down. I'm like, does he only want to keep black people down? Or is it all non-white people? Because if he's trying to keep all non-white people down, he really sucks at that, because East Asian Indians have managed to double the median household income for whites. So yeah, white man, you're sucking at the whole oppression thing. But even if, let's just say, nah, well, you know, it's because they look more European, so he's okay with them succeeding. And so it's only black folks, man, they don't like the African people, you know. So I'm like, okay, let's ride out with that. Let's apply some logic to that, some critical thinking. Do you understand that the median household income for non-African American blacks oddly enough, for Africans in America, like from Ghana, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Benin, Angola, Ethiopia, Sudan, the median household income for Africans in America, and let's just be real, there's some black Africans. I'm talking about blue black. Like, you're like, yo, your skin complexion is like oil. And I don't say that in a condescending way. I think it's an amazing thing that God created us all in such a way that our skin can have such variance where you can literally have oil black skin, or you can be basically a white person whose skin is doggone near translucent, right? And there's all variations in between. To me, that's not a sign of, quote, evolution. That's just a sign of God's brilliance as a creator, that he created that within us, that we can have so much variation. Anyway, so why is it that people like that who might be, quote, blue-black will come to the United States basically with nothing, and within one generation, their median household income is higher than that of the, quote, African Americans who've been born and raised and have been here for multiple generations? See, none of your feelings overrule my facts. But you know, one of the things I notice about people who are like African or other blacks who are Caribbean, like my wife's family, right? My wife is black, but she is not of African American heritage. And you know, I do the air quotes when I say African American because I don't like the term. It's ridiculous. I mean, obviously we all at some point came from Africa, but our culture is entirely American. My wife's culture was Latino. Although she was born and raised here, her parents immigrated from Panama. So you see us together and you think, oh, she's just a black woman. And yes, she is black, but she's not African American. But here's the thing. I look at her father, and her father is always immaculately dressed, right? It's amazing. So you're going to get treated differently based on your appearance. So when I look at the wretched subculture of African Americanism, and I look at how it's degraded and how it oftentimes promotes this idea of looking slovenly, how do you go out of your way to look slovenly and then complain that people don't treat you with high regard? That's stupid, right? When you look good, you feel good. See, black folks actually carried ourselves with more pride when we were dealing with more oppression. To me, it's an indication of how little oppression there really is for black folks to this day, that we're perfectly comfortable. When I say we, I mean a generic we. It doesn't include me. That so many black folks are perfectly comfortable with walking around looking slovenly, and yet will turn around and then complain that they're being oppressed. That's stupid. And yes, like another buddy of mine, Tim Parrish, who I recently met, he and I, we kind of had a kindred moment where it was like that moment in Step Brothers. Like, did we just become best friends? Why? Because we both were like, yo, I'll say something that's stupid. And it's like, he was like, yeah, I'll say it's stupid too. And people tell me not to say that, but we got to say it's stupid. And we were like, did we just become brothers? Right? Best friends? And so, yeah, that's funny. Shout out to my man, Tim Parrish, right? But yeah, I mean, it's just stupid for you to walk around looking slovenly, but yet expecting, let alone demanding, that other people treat you with high regard, when you obviously don't have high regard for yourself. One of the young men that I passively mentor, I don't directly mentor him, but I got to give props to my man, Melvin. Melvin is an incredible young man. I have a lot of respect for him. Melvin is from Liberia, and he and I have had extensive conversations, and you know, he came here when he was like 13, 14 years old, somewhere along that age range. And the transformation I've watched in him it's amazing. It's a beautiful sight to see this young man as he's grown into a man, right? And one of the things that he has done since I've met him is that he has totally changed his appearance. Melvin walks around business casual all the time. Like, I don't know, if he has a pair of jeans, he might have thrown them out. Like, Melvin wears slacks, a sweater, a polo shirt, a blazer, and one of the things that, you know, the brother's been doing recently, all of them been doing, the guys that I've been mentoring, is that, see, if you're not wearing a tie, and especially if you're wearing a sport coat, you got to rock the pocket square, baby, right? That pocket square is that thing that just kind of sets it off. So just like sometimes people use a tie, or oftentimes they use a tie, you can wear a very conservative suit, right? Conservative suit, conservative tie, shirt, and everything like that. Obviously, conservative shirt and tie, shirt, but you throw on a tie that's got a little pop to it, and it really sets off your look. But if you're not wearing a tie, you rock that pocket square, and you know, you got to get the pocket square just right. You can't, see, your pocket square shouldn't look so like neat, right? It's kind of funny. It's like, it's got to be in there just right, and it looks like a casual look, but it just sets off your look. And Melvin has mastered that look. Young man is like 23 years old. Melvin looks like a grown man should look. He carries himself differently. And so as he and I have had this conversation, the level of respect that Melvin gets from people is just, it's amazing. And I'm seeing him now beginning to influence other young black men, because they're seeing Melvin and they're seeing how he's been transformed and how the overall quality of his life has improved. And they're like, yo, I want to be like that. And I take a little bit of pride in knowing that I've had a little bit of a role in that. And that's one of the things that gives me the greatest pleasures in life. It's not just making money, although I plan to make lots of money because it's possible, and so I'm going to do it. But being able to pay it forward, being able to sow into the seeds, into the lives of other young black men, in particular young men, because I don't just mentor young black men, but that's who I've made my target audience. Being able to mentor them matters, right? That's the influence, that's the legacy I want to leave whenever I take my last breath, is knowing that other people's lives have improved because they met me. That's what inspires me. And so while it's a much deeper conversation, which I've already gone into to a large extent, or to a certain extent, because there's so much more to it, but it's a much deeper topic than what I've gone into in this last 50 minutes. When you look good, you feel good. When you feel good, you're more confident. When you're more confident, you perform better. You attract better to you. The laws of attraction take place. So I'm just saying, man, try to look good when you leave the house. You might even look as good as me one day. Yo, that's, I don't really take myself serious. Like, I'm one of the most serious people you'll ever meet. Like, it's just, I'm very, very serious, but I also like to laugh and have a good time. It's kind of that duality in my personality that I carry off with this savoir-faire, that I just do it with ease because it's really just who I am. But it's like, no, I'm not actually full of myself. I don't consider myself to be the best looking guy. My wife doesn't like when I say that. You know, I don't feel like I'm Mr. Handsome, but damn, I look good. Y'all take care. Gotta go. God bless.